Last one.
Then we'll have to run to get Gill. There's too many teams.
Sorry? The comments.
Alright, apologies already that we will be running over, but we will run over 10 minutes and no more. And hopefully this will be provocative enough. Yeah, to keep your attention. Okay, so I'm chairing this session, which we've titled STS Encounters with Art and Design. And we're structuring this session as a debate. So I think, you know, for the past couple of... Oh. Jane, don't play with the kids. Oh, sorry. Oh, my fault. Right. I will sit very still. So in the past couple of days, I think we've had several talks that have sort of raised the idea of visual representation. And actually what we're going to do is sort of pick up on representations and art and design in a slightly different way, or from a slightly different perspective, and really sort of picking up on this, on STS interactions and engagements and encounters with this sort of group of artists and designers who are interested in using biology and the life sciences as a source of inspiration. So this might be using biological materials as substrate for work. It might be taking ideas and concepts from the life science, from biotechnology as kind of sources of inspiration, as ideas to critique or to explore and to work with. I think some of these works are designed to be sort of explicitly critical of science and technology, and others are maybe a little bit more explorative, perhaps less explicitly critical, designed for different purposes to try and open up discussion that engages with ideas about science and society, right? So there are a variety of approaches, I think, within this kind of art and design around science and technology, and different kinds of purposes and outputs and things. So what we thought we would do today is kind of open up a debate about some of these perspectives about how we might begin to see or conceptualize the relationship between this art and design world and STS. So we have four distinguished panelists, competitors, who have all in recent years kind of encountered practitioners from the world of art and design in various ways. This might be in the form of kind of formal collaborations, perhaps where each person in the collaboration has a defined and quite different role, or where actually they're working together to kind of produce common objects and common knowledge. They might be ethnographic, sort of encounters that involve ethnographic observations of the art and design world. They might be sort of social encounters and whatnot. But I think everyone on this panel has found these quite provocative encounters and engagements in various ways. And what we're going to ask them to do is to reflect on what they see as being sort of core intersection points between art and design and STS. So kind of possible ideas that converge or don't converge across the two, and sort of how it's making them reflect about their practices and their way of thinking. So each panelist has got 5 minutes, and they each have sort of a provocative statement that they're going to be working around and sort of using their experiences to defend. So they're each going to have 5 minutes, then we'll open it up for discussion, and at the end there'll be a sort of a short period for rebuttal, and you each have colored cards on the table, and that will be for you to vote on who you think has made the most convincing case, okay? So the 4 statements are as followed, and they're color-coded according to the sheets on the table. So Jane is going to be taking the position that art is in fact the new STS, and that really there's a lot that we can and should be learning from the art and design world, and in fact they do STS better than we do. Pablo, thanks, but no thanks. Gill is going to be using her experiences to talk about art and design as a possible method for provocation and clarification. And Maria is going to tell us a little bit more in detail about why art is awesome. All right, so 5 minutes each. I will be setting a timer, and you will hear an elephant. What does an elephant do? Roar?
Trumpet.
Trumpet. You will hear an elephant trumpet when their time is up, so they'll be cut off if they go longer than 5 minutes. Off you go, Jane.
Right, so art is the new STS is my argument. I'm not going to try and define art or STS because I've only got 5 minutes and they're huge topics. What I'm going to say is there was a project called Synthetic Aesthetics, and me and Pablo worked on it, and we had 6 artists and designers and 6 synthetic biologists. We brought them together in pairs, And what we were originally going to do was study their interactions. So this is Pablo studying the interactions between a synthetic biologist and an artist. But what I found in my studying of these interactions was actually the artists and designers were doing the same kind of thing that I was. They were trying to understand the science and technology really deeply, and then they were trying to critically engage with it. And I'll just give you some examples of this type of work, which I think shows this. This is the work by a critical designer, Daisy Ginsberg. She was interested in the interactions between our bodies and synthetic biology, and she decided that the kind of interface for this interaction would be the gut. So she designed this. I didn't realise it would be quite so big here. What you do is you take a yogurty drink, and then it interacts with your gut bacteria, it changes colour, and you can tell what illness you've got. So I think what this is great about this is it really provokes discussion about the future applications of these technologies. The second example is from our project, and it's a smell artist. Here she is in her studio, who collaborated with a synthetic biologist. They became very interested in our relationship to our microbiome, the bacteria that are on us and in us. So to cut a long story short, what they did is they extracted bits of bacteria from different bits of people's bodies, and they used it to make cheese in the laboratory. And these are the different cheeses. So we have armpit cheese and toe cheese, hand cheese. Toe cheese smells really, really bad. I wouldn't recommend that one. So this project, again, is quite playful. But what it does is I think it raises really profound questions about the boundaries between us and bacteria, and about the boundaries between our bodies and the food that we eat. Again, deep and interesting questions for STS. So I think that there are ways, that things that we share with artists and designers. There are several things that we share as STS researchers. We're interested in critically interrogating the science. We're interested in exposing the assumptions that underlie it and revealing alternatives. We're interested in the futures that are imagined by scientists and engineers, and presenting different ways of imagining those futures. Artists and designers will do this through these kind of contestable prototypes or objects. We might do it through different methods, such as constructive technology assessment or anticipatory governance. And we're interested in opening up science and technology to a range of different perspectives across disciplinary boundaries. And I think actually artists and designers are often more successful than us in this. This is another image which is meant to kind of speculate about how the domains of life will be influenced by the synthetic organisms. And what's interesting about this image is that it has travelled incredibly successfully. It is being taken up, it is being debated and discussed by scientists and engineers in a way that, quite frankly, our academic papers haven't. Also, I have been at conferences where the most provocative and interesting intervention after a series of rather boring social science talks has been the intervention by an artist or a designer or a playwright. So my kind of overall point is that I think that art and design are really valuable. We can have really useful collaborations with them. They can extend our critical capacity and deepen our analysis of science and technology. So vote blue.
Okay, if what we're interested in doing is critically looking at or critically engaging with science and technology, art and design as they currently stand do not help us do that, so thanks but no thanks. We don't need this type of work, and in fact, it's kind of hurting us. So let's take a very pragmatic look at this. What are the practical consequences of bringing this type of work into the kind of work that we're interested in doing? And I'm going to offer 3 arguments as to why it's problematic. First, let's start with this. This is GFP Bunny by Adora Cat. It's a very famous piece of bioart, and it's interesting, it's attention-grabbing. After all, it's a bunny that's glowing green. So it's cute, and it's interesting, and it's curious, but what is its point? What is it getting us to think about? The fact that a GFP is used in science laboratories? Well, okay, but surely there are more important things that have to do with life sciences and biotech. This is an exaggeration of something that is actually rather mundane when it comes to the issues we could be talking about. So I think art too often goes for the attention grabbing, despite the fact that what is attention grabbing is not necessarily critically salient. Now, let's focus on some of this critical design work that Jane was talking about. And here we go, let's talk about this catalog again. This is the same work that Jane was talking about. This is a story from the Daily Mail. The Daily Mail picked up this project and reported that scientists have created this amazing new technology that you can diagnose, sick sickness that you might have through yoga. No, in fact, you can't, because it's not a real technology. Critical design, particularly of the RCA school, uses design futures, as they refer to them, to try to engage with science, and that's fine, it's interesting. However, there's the amazing potential for this kind of performativity, bringing into existence something which in fact does not exist. And again, like GFP money, this is just a distraction. Okay, why are we focusing on things that don't in fact exist when we could be talking about actual issues that are critically salient? And incidentally, because this is mentioned to me, say what you will about the Daily Mail's quality of reporting, it has serious circulation, so this does matter. Now, something that I want to finish with, and I think it's probably the most important aspect of this, this is the cheese project. So the exact same project that Jim was mentioning. It's actually a project I like a lot. This photo was taken when we were working on this thing. We worked on this in Boston and Berlin, and I cannot even begin to tell you how many times we had to take this photo. We had to take it over and over and over again because our design fellow just was not satisfied with its aesthetic quality. Essentially, it wasn't beautiful enough. The photo wasn't pretty. And that, I think, is a tremendous problem of a lot of this work, is that the focus on aesthetics can lend an effect of glamorization to something which we don't need to be glamorized. Style and glamour aren't helping the critical project in any sense, and in fact, they may be contributing counterproductively to that project. So, style and attractiveness here aren't helping anybody, in my opinion. This notion of glamour also extends to design as a fad, and it's become that in certain important elements of synthetic biology, like the undergraduate competition iGen, where increasingly more and more designers are part of the teams that compete in this. And they're part of these teams not for any kind of critical perspective, but because it's become a fad. You know, it's something that'll get you points because look how sophisticated you are. You have a designer in your team. And I would suggest that the inclusion of designers in conferences like the X.0 series of synthetic biology is actually a manifestation of the exact same thing. Not necessarily because these individuals are contributing that much critical perspective, but because there is a sophistication associated with these disciplines. I'll finish by mentioning the same project that Jane finished with the Synthetic Kingdom. It was featured on the cover of Nucleic Acids Research, so a scientific journal, without any kind of context. No discussion of what this project was, no article inside the journal talking about its relevance to synthetic biology. It was just an image. And what was the image doing in this journal? Well, it was making it pretty. It was beautifying it, it was lending it sophistication, and absolutely nothing more. You should vote yellow because there's chimps, chimps eat bananas, bananas are yellow.
Talk about putting down the gauntlet, eh? Okay, my show. I'm going to talk about how we can talk about using art about actual issues, about how social scientists can work with artists, about things that are important, that are not just glamorizing certain kind of points or science or anything like that. I'm going to talk about a project that I'm involved with colleagues Leah Gilman, who's a social scientist working with myself, Ashley Jacob, who's the artist working with us, and Sean Harman, the lawyer. And I hope you get the plan because it took me ages to think about it. And this is about art and the Implantable Smart Technology Project. ISSTI. Yes. And then we've got artist method. I'm going to use, I'm going to argue really strongly, remember red is the colour, I'm going to argue really strongly that social scientists as researchers need to think more about using art, about using culture in general, as ways in which we can provoke our participants, provoking ourselves perhaps, huh? And also help clarify, giving it to our participants in a way that they can empower themselves, that they can empower the ways that they can respond to us. Okay, so here's a wee Venn diagram, which I quite like. So here we have social science, the law, because that's who I work with as well, and the art here. So might I just add a couple of points actually, which my previous speakers failed to mention, was the fact that, you know, there of differences in law between different lawyers. There's quite a lot of differences in art between different artists. Okay, there's illustrators. We've got the joy of working with an illustrator, a very talented one, and social scientists, and myself, of course. So we do this. We've done social science and law. We've done law and art, and we've done art and social science. Where we're at is in here, and that's why you should vote red, just for the novelty. So my first point is art and qualitative method provokes. And this specifically is in relation to interviews with stakeholders. So interviews takes the word interview. So it's an interview, it's a social exchange. What we're doing is we're taking art, something a bit more visceral, visual at least, cultural, and placing it within a social exchange. An interview is an exchange of views. So ISSTI has worked with us over the last few months. She comes to all our meetings, from social sciences, laws. Poor girl, I don't know how she puts up with us. And what she does is she kind of sort of absorbs our kind of quantifications, our kind of points, our moving on, our dialogue, or this or that, about what an implantable smart technology is. Let's face it, we don't even know what implantable smart technology is. All we know is that it's smart and that it's implantable. That's good. So she has, as a result of that, generated concept boards. And these are some of the images that she's starting to use, that she's went away after she's observed us discussing, dissecting, like blethering really, about what an implantable smart technology is. She's also reviewed some of the social science data from a previous project when we did some interviews with guys about biosensors implanted. So these are kind of the ideas that she's got going just now. And we expect, just as social scientists' work evolves and changes, that her work will evolve and change along with it. And these are some of the concepts and pictures that Leah Gilman and ISSTI worked together to produce a pamphlet of different images, and we took them to stakeholders in order to ask them what they thought implantable smart technologies were, because like we don't know. And this is the result of one interview. So this is an early interview, and his name is Mark Burnell, an engineer. So he started going, at the end of the interview, he's been shown this booklet, and he's kind of started saying to Leah, no, I don't think there's anything I feel I should say that I'm not saying. And then may I draw the word to the word accept. And this is the booklet that we've given, that this is drawn out a science fiction view of the cyborg, be it for enhancement of this sort of thing, make people better. It's very not what this is all about. It's very not what this is all about. So we've pushed them on a little bit further, okay? The second point, art and qualitative method offers clarification and generation. What we've been doing, and this is a standard method, right, when we're interviewing children, is we get children to draw pictures. So we've been going to like engineers and lawyers and saying, that's cool, that's really interesting. While we're chatting, why don't you draw a picture while you're chatting and see what you come up with? So this is the lawyer talking about his valley of death. So he kind of started, this kind of blurb when he's talking about this, is he finishes, and then he shows Leah the drawing, and he says, oh, by the way, we haven't talked about the commercial valley of death. This is the engineer, and he's talking about, what's happened to his picture? The tractor. If you can see that, he talks about electricity, he talks about how this electricity lets go the tractor, and a drug is delivered. So again, it's clarifying, it's provoking.
Clarify the point.
It's good. Vote red.
Yeah,
Well, not really red, sorry. It's more the orange card. So basically, what I have to tell, this is the provocative statement that art is awesome. And I have a couple of examples to illustrate my point. So the first one comes from my PhD. I did a PhD in neuroscience, and during my project I was developing nerves to repair, developing grafts to repair injured nerves. So I was treating them, and then I was using animals as part of my research model. At the same time, I collaborated with artists that were interested, as well as I was, in reconfiguration of bodies. So this artist, Blue Chapel, was doing a residency at Symbiotica, which is a laboratory where they do biological art, so using biological materials or techniques from the biological sciences. Who was interested in these changes in materiality between living and non-living? So some of you this morning might have put a facial cream, and in that facial cream most likely there will be collagen that most likely was extracted from an animal. And who was interested in these changes? So what we did was, just before we sacrificed the animals, and we had a very hypocritical approach, which I can talk about it in question time. Just before we sacrificed the animals, we filmed the animals, and then I collected the nerves for my research, she collected the tails, extracted collagen from the tails, made screens, and then projected the last minutes of the life of the rats on the screens made of collagen from their own tails. Now, the second project I am going to talk about was fast forward a few years, and I have finished my PhD, and I moved to Edinburgh, and thanks to Steve, I was now working at the forum and looking at the engagements between art and science. And I went to Sweden, and just to a conference, and just before the conference I visited my friend Matt Selstrom, that did a PhD with me, and now he was working on this other project, and he tells me, the principal investigator of my project, this weekend is actually performing the first womb transplant between a mother that is donating her womb to her daughter, and this surgeon is doing that surgery today. And I just went, whoa, those are huge ethical dilemmas you're dealing with there. And he said, yeah, and how can we address them, really? Around this time, I was also organizing a symposium called The Elaboration of Things, to talk about the materiality or not of things and living beings. And probably with Matt's work in mind, I decided to invite this artist to present her work at our symposium. So I developed a series of works where she tries to address the problems of she tries to address the material instincts, but also the problems of endangered species, and in this overcrowded world of ours, to solve some problems of the problem of world famine. So what she's proposing with a series of provocative works, such as I Want to Deliver a Shark, is that you can have an offspring, but instead of having a human one, why don't you just have a shark one, and then have an endangered species? Or, alternatively, you can go on her website and see this absolutely beautiful video she did, which was, I will deliver a tuna, which then she proceeds to eat, which goes really well with her cultural background, because she is Japanese. So basically, this leads me to my final point, which is art is a way to explore and address and discuss and engage with the many ethical issues raised by scientific practices. Orange cards, thank you.
All right. So 4 provocative statements, each making a different case for the role of art in design, whether it's STS, whether it's not doing STS, whether there's opportunities there for methods and collaborations, and the types of things it can do. Questions?